Hi there, it's Alexandra from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog with the May garden tour. It's been a stop-start month weather-wise. It started off really blazingly hot, but quite soon dipped to some quite low temperatures, more or less 6 or 7 degrees Celsius, which is about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. But luckily, here in the southeast of England, we didn't actually have a late frost. It started off also very dry, and then it hailed, and then we had rain. But finally, the garden is looking incredibly green. The leaves are all just about out, or they're emerging, and that is the most wonderful thing about the garden at this time of year. And the other thing that is really brilliant is the self-seeders. I have loads of self-seeding plants and they just fill gaps wherever I want them to. And of course, because they're self-seeders, I can pull them up if I don't want them there. A gardening friend did remind me that you have to know a certain amount about gardening to be successful with self-seeders, because you need to know the difference between a weed seedling and a seedling you want to keep. However, in my early years when I was learning about gardening, I just didn't actually do very much weeding. So the self-seeders just popped up and the weeds popped up, and I now have wonderful self-seeders and a terribly bad weed problem, which I am trying to address. There are two self-seeded surprises this year, and one is an Amelanchier tree. Now, I didn't even know that Amelanchiers could self-seed, and I'm really not sure how it's happened. But we have an Amelanchier that I planted on one side of the garden, and on the other side of the garden, last month I noticed there were Amelanchier flowers. And now the lovely light green leaves have popped up. Now, I must have noticed this at some point over the last few years, because it's popped up as a multi-stemmed tree, which means that it originally came up as a single stem. I will have cut it down and it will then have sprouted 2 or 3 stems. I think it's absolutely beautiful with the emerging catinus or smoke bush foliage, which is red. So I'm going to leave it there, but I'm still quite baffled as to how it actually happened. The other surprise, which I noticed last year, was Rosa glauca. Now, roses can self-seed, but I don't think it's very common. A kind bird will have brought a rose hip over, and it will have got established, and I will have not noticed it until I suddenly realised it was a lovely reddish-blue foliage Rosa glauca. Once again, I really love the emerging foliage against the bright greens of spring. My main self-seeders are out in force, and that's the alliums, and they have their onion heads just waiting to come into flower. They're called Allium Christophii and Allium Purple Sensation, and they just roam around. I probably bought no more than about a dozen bulbs of each, and now I have dozens and dozens. The Aquilegia pops up wherever it likes. And Euphorbias also create a wonderful amount of ground cover and bright green contrast against the tulips. This is Euphorbia robii, which is so self-seeding to the point of being positively invasive, but I do love it at this time of year. And this is Euphorbia oblongata, which I grew from seed about 10 or 15 years ago, and subsequently it's just self-seeded itself around the garden, and I pull it up if I don't want it there. There are better behaved euphorbias, however, and this is Euphorbia palustris, which is beloved of all the garden show designers and looks lovely at this time of year, requires very little care and just stays where you planted it. And another euphorbia that stays where you planted it is Euphorbia robii, which has brightened up this dark corner, and I do absolutely nothing to it. It's evergreen and it's just there all the year round, although it does look its best at this time of year in May. In the vegetable garden, I've got grey aphids on my kale plants, and I've asked around with gardening friends, and it seems that you can get rid of grey aphids with a soap solution. You can wash them with a soap solution, or you can use chemicals. But these are tiny little plantlets, and also everyone says it is quite difficult to get rid of grey aphids once you've got them on a permanent basis. Grey aphids only live on the cabbage family. They don't live on spinach, they don't live on salad. So I'm going to throw away these kales that are covered in grey aphids, and I'm not going to grow anything from the cabbage family for a year or two, which is a shame, but I think it might get the grey aphids out of the garden. Meanwhile, the quince and the apple blossom is looking wonderful. Most of the crab apple blossom is over, But the quince and the apple blossom has taken over, and once again quince is a wonderful tree for smaller gardens. It has the most beautiful blossom in spring, and then in autumn you've got the fruits and you can make quince jelly. Viburnum is a lovely shrub in spring. I particularly love my Viburnum opulus, otherwise known as Guelder Rose or Snowball Bush, and this has got wonderful pom-pom white flowers which will be around probably for about a month. One astonishing plant I must mention is Clematis recta. It rises up in a great big dark purple ball at this time of year, and next month it will then explode out into a cascade of flowers. It makes a fantastic contrast to the bright greens in the border, and apart from cutting it down at the end of the year, it requires absolutely no attention. In the spring garden tour, I pointed out that I had a plant called ornamental kiwi or Actinidia colonicta outside the back door with white painted tips to its leaves. Well, those tips are now turning pink, so that looks lovely. The garden is really revving up for a blast of song and colour, and I think the next month's garden tour is going to just explode into the best the garden will be. So I hope you'll join us by subscribing to the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel for tips, ideas and inspiration for what gardening experts used to call small gardens, and which I think really are middle-sized. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.